everyone, and welcome to our panel. Our session title today is How Tech-Forward Brokers Are Meeting Today's Changing Consumer Expectations with a Faster, More Efficient Transaction Experience. I'm here with a great panel, a diverse panel. We have Ashley Dane, the Regional Director of Technology from RE/MAX of Michigan. We have John Matthews, Senior Vice President of Residential Sales for Baird Warner in Chicago. And we have Russell Smith, the Chief Revenue Officer of Earnnest, I'll say that again. And why don't you each take a minute, and we'll start with Ashley and just tell us what you do, Ashley, at RE/MAX of Michigan.
Yes, so at RE/MAX of Michigan, I am the Regional Director of Technology. I essentially, at the franchise level, help with tech consultancy for all of our brokers and agents across the state of Michigan.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. John?
I'm going to be a little bit more fluffy. So I think my job is to find dreamers, people who want to buy and sell homes. They understand the importance of home ownership and wealth building. And sometimes before that, they have to take other avenues such as renting. But another part of that is to find dreamers of people who want to come into our industry and change their lives and become highly successful.
Great. And Russell?
Yeah, Russell Smith. As Joe said, I'm the CRO at Earnnest. I lead our go-to-market teams, marketing, sales, customer success, and excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we know RE/MAX of Michigan is a broker, and lots of people know Baird Warner as well. Can you tell us quickly what Earnnest does, Russell?
Sure. Yeah, so Earnnest is how money moves in real estate. We're a digital payments company based in Greenville, South Carolina. Mainly known, we're the industry leader in digital earnest money payments, free for agents, free for escrow holders. And we also offer a full payment suite for all payment occasions. So for brokerages, that's billing their agents for their fees, dispersing their commissions, their leasing business, et cetera.
Okay, great. Thanks, Russell. And I should probably introduce myself. I'm Joe Kazzoun. I'm the general manager at dotloop. We're a transaction management platform. I know you all got a few questions ahead of time, as we usually do with these panels, but I want to throw you a little bit of a curveball to start. When I first read the title, one of the things that jumped out at me was that, technology can make transactions faster. And, I've been in transaction management for about 15 years now, and I always push back on that a little bit. I was a realtor once upon a time, and so worked with actual clients, driving them around in the car and helping them through the transaction. And I kind of disagree with the premise that technology can make the transaction shorter in terms of moving from whatever, a 45-day to a 8-day close. I don't know that everybody wants that. We have boxes to pack and people to move, and we all have to get psychologically ready. We have to get an inspector into the home and go through other processes. I think about technology making the things we do faster, more frictionless, not only for agents, transaction coordinators, and brokers, but of course, consumers. And I'd just love to get your reactions, and we'll start with you, Russell. Do you think technology can make the transaction shorter? We were talking earlier about you being a home buyer recently.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Joe. I think technology can make the transaction faster. I think the root of the question is, at what point are there kind of diminishing marginal returns there on speed? And, I think faster can be, so to that point, faster can be better to an extent. I definitely think one of the areas it can help is making the transaction more predictable, more frictionless. I think, there's a concept in technology called benevolent deception, or kind of artificial weighting. It's like when you're doing TurboTax and it shows the screen that says, checking for all of your possible, write-offs, and they're not doing anything. It's to make it seem more valuable to give you that time. So I think from the industry perspective, something where you can click a button, even if that were possible, because it's not, buying a home is not trading a share of, IBM stock. It's a unique asset. But I think there is some, some value to being able to think through it, to put everything together. So I think it can become a little bit faster. I think it can definitely become more predictable, more transparent, more frictionless. But speed is not, unlimited speed is not always better, I would say.
So, Ashley, what do you think if I walked into your house and said, "Hey, I can get your house sold and move you out in 6 days"? Would you be all right with that? Or
Um,
I'm sorry, I'm steering the panel here. I shouldn't say that.
if you had met my husband, you would understand there's no way we could pack our home in 6 days. It would be impossible. So it would not be the technology. It would be the physical organization required to do it. No. But from a function of can technology make the transaction faster? There's different ways to look at it. I mean, are you looking at number of days, or more importantly, maybe we should be looking at number of minutes and hours that each party in the transaction has to physically engage with the transaction to get it to the finish line. And so much of technology has been bound by geographic and physical parameters, needing to be in the same physical space to do X, Y, or Z. And when you start to use technology to handle those tasks, you take off the ancillary time that it took to get there, to physically be in that space to accomplish said task. And if we shave off that time, I think when you look at all parties of the transaction, the agents, the consumers, the brokers, the admins, technology truly can make a faster transaction. And especially from the agent perspective, the broker perspective, when you're trying to free up more time to enable more transactions, it's crucially important that you start to pay attention to those not wasted minutes, but minutes that are dedicated to things that could have been eliminated had you more effectively been using the technology. So does it make a transaction faster from point A to point B? I think arguably, but I mean, you're talking a matter of hours, not necessarily a matter of days in many cases. But when you're looking at an agent that's trying to grow their business, if you can give them time back and they can do 2 transactions in the time of their lives and their business work hours that they previously could only do 1, you've really enormously helped that agent and their efficiencies and proficiency in the industry.
Thanks. And in a few minutes, I'll be interested to hearing what your brokerage is doing around that specifically. John, what do you think? Faster or better, or what?
I think what Russell and Ashley said, but we're right on, is that it'll be a perception of faster. And I'm looking at it from my world, is that we have 3 businesses. We have our residential sales, we have our mortgage company, and we have our title company. And with our transaction management software that we use, is that it's fully integrated. It integrates into all our businesses. So we can coordinate everything. Part of the transaction is very transparent and open to the consumer. And why is that important? There was a recent study by Shopkick.com said 80% of consumers prefer a one-stop shop. And we truly believe that at our company, that they would just as soon come to us and take care of everything. So that's why it's so important. And on the other side of that, there was another study by Business to Community that 72% of consumers will be willing to pay more to have a great customer service. And so I think putting that all together, the transaction is faster because you're at a much higher comfort level. So like Ashley said, those minutes and time, but that minutes and times are not worrying about the transaction. It's just knowing you're moving forward in your life.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well. And in the world of technology as consumers, time keeps getting more and more compressed. What used to take me hours then went to minutes, and sometimes can be seconds when it's technology enabled. And we have these expectations, and we all know, and I'll be Captain Obvious here, consumers want, have greater expectations for speed and efficiency. We all experience this in our lives. We hear people in our industry always say that, well, realtors aren't technical, right? And I push back on that. I would say that realtors have always used technology that makes them better at what they do, faster at what they do, and makes them more able to serve their customers. One of the stats I saw, or metrics I saw earlier, is that on dotloop alone, 76 million documents have been edited on a mobile device. That's a lot. And if you asked me 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I'd say, who wants to fill out a residential real estate purchase contract on a 4 or 5 inch screen, right? But people are clearly doing it, and they're doing it, I assume, to serve their clients better. So as consumer expectations have changed, they're wanting different things, more transparency, simplicity, all of that. Maybe we'll start with you, John, go back to you and talk about how you see agents responding to that. What are they doing, and what is Baird Warner doing to meet that demand and those changing desires on the parts of consumers?
Well, and this is a topic that's more than a half hour. But if you read the recent NAR profile of home buyers and sellers, there was some interesting statistics in there that buyers, 2/3 of the time, the conduit is still the agent. It's the sphere of influence referral, the past client, or another agent's referring it to another agent. And that increased over 2020. And with sellers, the number's even higher. It's 3 out of 4 sellers. So when you talk consumer, in my world, and it would be interesting to see what Ashley says, the consumer is the agent. Because if we provide the tools to make the agent's job easier to communicate with their client, then that's going to make the transaction smoother. And that, as a company, that's what, and you may know our tagline, it's easier here. And it's not just designed for the consumer, it's designed for agents. And that's our ultimate goal. And that's, why we have great partners like dotloop.
Well, thanks. Ashley, what are you seeing in your brokerage?
I think all real estate agents, myself, all of us would benefit from being a student of American consumerism, to understand deeply and intuitively what American consumers want. We want things to be easy. We want things to be seamless. We want information to come to us. As much ability as we have to go out and seek information, if information comes to us conveniently, it makes us feel happy. It makes us have a more positive outlook with whatever it is that we're doing. And for our agents to elevate themselves. I mean, in my role, I help consult with all of our franchisees. Our brokers are our consumers in many ways, and their agents are their consumers in many ways, and their consumers are our consumers in many ways. And we need to pay attention to all 3 of those tiers. We need to make things extremely efficient. We need to provide things to people before they're asking for them. When we think about what can we help an agent do to increase their market share, and how does that impact a broker's ability to increase their market share, at every step, we have to be looking for efficiencies and ease and convenience. And whatever technology it is that we're talking about, we have to, it's almost like precognition. One of my favorite books and concepts has always come back to it. It haunts me. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma. It's the idea that if you sit back and try to anticipate what someone is going to want, you'll be left behind in the market. The consumer will decide what they want. You can't create with what you have now. You have to think 5 steps ahead in advance, because if you're the innovator one day, you're left behind the next day because you haven't evolved to consumer demand and what the consumer wants. In every decision that we make, we have to be extremely thoughtful of what is taking place for this consumer, in our case, our brokers, our franchisees, what's taking place for our agents, and what's taking place for the consumers that's on the other end of those deals. It's so highly important. It's the focus of every day and every week and every month. What is the strategy? What do we need to do? Because the way that I look at it is, if I can see the future, if I can see what changes are going to be happening in our industry in 90 days, in a year, in 3 years, if I can move our ship for our brand in advance of that, our agents are already ahead of that. They're already meeting the consumer demand. There's so many different steps of the transaction that you can pay attention to, whether it's acquiring leads, whether it's communicating with potential buyers and sellers, whether they're already your client and now you're working with them through a deal. There are hundreds of touch points where this American consumerism, our demand for things to be easy and to be convenient, if we can place any one of our tiers, our brokers or our agents in front of their clients, if we can provide them with the technology to give them information before they're seeking it themselves, the consumer interpretation of our brand and our business and our industry will be significantly higher.
So can you give me a couple of examples of things you've either just rolled out or things you're looking to do that you can share publicly?
Well, I think when I was mentioning it before, that real estate gets so tied into physical boundaries, geological presence. And if the pandemic taught us anything, it was that in many cases, those are artificial. You do not have to physically be present in all of these many steps. When I first rolled dotloop out to my very first agents and offices years and years and years ago, when I first introduced the concept, I had agents sit across the table from me and say, no, absolutely not. I love the experience of sitting at the kitchen table with my client and signing that listing agreement. And I agree, that is a trusted and treasured moment. But there are opportunities to interject non-physical presence to move portions of this transaction along. I just did a statewide technology tour. We brought all the agents together and talked about the latest and greatest. And I laughed with them. I said, okay, do you remember when I was the crazy person that was telling you that digital signatures were going to be a thing? And you told me that you were wrong and you were not going to use it. Would any of you trade this at this point? Would any of you give it back? And universally, they all laughed. None of the agents that have adopted digital signatures, digital signing, cloud storage for documents, none of them would go back. So at this point, it's analyzing every point of it. I mean, we sit today on a Zoom call. I am imploring our agents at this point. All of us want to be done with Zoom. We want to move past this. But again, Zoom helps break down physical geographic boundaries. There's efficiencies if you can have communications in a very personal face-to-face digital version where you don't have to physically be in the room. Earnnest, this is another one. I knew that we needed a digital earnest money solution for every single practitioner in real estate when I was sitting at a counter helping an admin and someone came in with stacks of cash to sit on the counter and it was just like all emergency red, like, no, absolutely take the cash away. You have to get a check. They don't have a checking account. And I remember when I first, it was an Inman event that I first bumped into Earnnest, and immediately I wanted this product. I wanted to know how we could get it into the hands of our practitioners so that they would be able to provide that efficiency with the consumers. It doesn't matter if it's marketing or digital signatures or cloud storage or earnest money deposit. If you are physically touching something, there's probably a better way to do it. And not that it should take over everything. The answer is not that there should be no physical interaction between you and your clients. That's a terrible, terrible way to do business in many cases. But there are opportunities to improve the consumer experience by breaking down our perceptions of what a real estate transaction between consumer and agent must look like.
John, thanks, Ashley. Before I go back to Russell, just same question to you, John. What are some examples of things you're doing in your brokerage?
I think that I'll go back to my other answer is that the softwares that we look at, they have to integrate. It's just so important. And I was looking at some of the questions you have down the road, and I'll probably repeat myself, but one size doesn't fit all. And you almost have to look at options, especially when you have a large agent field, is that you have to look at options and you may possibly have to go in some different directions to meet the needs of not only the agents, but then meet the needs of the consumers. But certainly I think that we stand right in line with companies like Earnnest that was a necessity last year, where you just rolling out a new one now that will help our consumers with all their utilities and movers and those type of things, more of a concierge service, which is all created in a dashboard. And, that dashboard language, if you've been going to Inman for the last 5 years, it's all about dashboards. RE/MAX developed a great dashboard several years back, and I think everybody's followed suit. And the key is how powerful is your dashboard when you're working with your consumer and you can just sit there on your mobile device and said, I can take care of that right now. And so I'm not getting real specific on anything, just not to name names, but it's all here and it's very easy for the consumer. And Ashley's answer was wonderful, and mine is just simple.
And I love that. And yeah, I can relate. Dashboards really give us that key information that we need in that moment. I also think of workflows. What am I doing? Am I listing a property? Am I getting ready to go show properties? Am I getting ready to write an offer? What are those things that I'm doing? Russell, I wanted to ask you, Ashley was talking about e-signatures being commonplace now, something we didn't have that long ago. The e-sign act was signed over 20 years ago, but it took us about 10, 15 years to really get going. Now we have digital, the Earnnest money built in, and in our case, Earnnest is integrated into dotloop. We see adoption going up really, really quickly, and probably a few years from now, we'll look back and say, why weren't we doing this sooner, right?
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about the adoption curve you're seeing. And then I want to relate it to another question we have. Do you see certain patterns in who's using it generationally, where people are on the spectrum in terms of their time as an agent or age? Tell us a little bit about that, if you could.
Yeah, no, and I think kind of to jump back to one of Ashley's points about consumer expectations and moving to meet them, kind of where the skate to where the puck is going, to sprinkle in a sports analogy here. It doesn't always mean more technology. We talked about with speed, like more speed isn't always better. More technology is not necessarily always better. In the instance of, this is, we always say it's an in-person business, these relationships, that's how, repeat business comes to agents. And, that in-person aspect is absolutely, is not necessarily going away. Maybe it's becoming more optional. And even something like an e-signature, which to defend real estate agents was adopted faster than that changed. This whole idea that technology could not be adopted in real estate at any speed was totally broken by e-signature. And I think agents are in that tough spot because they are the Sherpa to the transaction, right? They are at the center of it. And what they're at the center of is a bunch of wood and nails and dirt and the rest of an industry that is arguably far more behind the tech curve. I mean, the average lender, title, insurance is not at the same, is not at the point of digital transformation that I think your average agent or brokerage is. And so I think at least relative to the industry they're in, the average agent is ahead of the curve. But again, they are also kind of wedged between two things that are not moving at their same pace. So as that relates to, even e-signature at the kitchen table, well, what's really the point? It's not necessarily the speed or just technology for the sake of technology, but you can still do it in person. It's the transparency. It's receiving that digital copy immediately and having it in the cloud for, 6 months later when you're like, wait, what was in that disclosure package? Weren't we supposed to get, you can just, you're not looking for some copy that maybe you made or didn't. It's right there in your Google Drive or your dotloop account or wherever that is stored for the long-term retention. So I think that's where, again, not just technology for the sake of technology, not just saying that people are going to be remote forever necessarily, but there's real value there of simplicity and transparency. I think those things are always going to be in vogue. As it relates to adoption, I think what we saw through the pandemic was that some things were forced. It wasn't just this typical kind of like early adopters, middle majority, late majority, laggards curve that you always see with technology. It really forced a lot of people to the front of the line. So to your point about adoption, I think two things for Earnnest where we've really leaned in is one, really wanting to make sure that we have best in class service. So we've really beefed up our, in-office support and success teams to make sure, some people just want to, leave me alone. I'll figure it out on my own, or I'll watch the YouTube video. Some people want to call a phone number and talk to a human being. And at Earnnest, we want to meet people wherever they need that, going to their own sales trainings, proactive, reactive, however best suits them. And from an access point, to John's point, a big focus for us in the past and now going forward is more points of access, more integrations where, we've got our native app on the phone and I'm an agent at Baird Warner. And, maybe one day I can, I create my Earnnest money request for my client from the iPhone app, and the next day I'm in dotloop and I do it from there for another transaction. We want to make it seamless, and we want to go into the the process that the agent is already doing, as opposed to creating one more app, one more product. We have our out of the box products. We're proud of them. We think they're phenomenal. But getting into their natural workflows is going to be better for us. It's going to be better for the agent. So I think we've definitely had to, that adoption curve has been sped up. So it's just really about meeting people's needs, but the generational piece has not really been too much of a challenge for us, as much as frankly I would have expected. I think this is something, you don't need to be a 14-year-old crypto investor to think that paper checks are out of style. I mean, even up until in 2018, the Federal Reserve said that something like 45% of Americans don't write a single check per year. And that was before the pandemic. So now you just signed your contract, and back to the agent being at the center of the transaction, I always say the agent experience is the client experience of the entire. If someone has a bad real estate transaction, they probably don't feel very good about their agent, and vice versa. And the first thing someone does when they sign their contract is immediately have to fork over this money. And if half of the country doesn't even have a checkbook, or in some places, you can't even use a personal check, you have to drive to the bank, send a wire, which, gosh, we can talk about how painful that is, or get a certified check or whatever. Being able to do that from your phone, wherever you are, even if you are in person together, over 80% of the actual payer experience on Earnnest, the actual home buyer, over 80% of the transactions, them actually receiving the request from their agent, attaching a bank account, completing the transfer, is all done in under 3 minutes. So making it seamless, easy, secure, transparent, simple is at the core of everything we do.
Yeah, that hits home for me. I obviously did not graduate from college 2 years ago. But if you look at my checkbook, I think, you'll find checks in there, from 2017 or something. I'd write them for my daughter's school or whatever. And so I didn't hear you say that kind of generations, there's no real significance there in terms of how people operate. John, let's go to you, and then Ashley. Do you see any difference? Do you have to change what you do for different segments? And it may not just be age. There may be other factors that affect what you do for different groups of agents within your company.
So I actually thought that was a great question. Interesting enough, our regional MLS is broker owned. So as a preferred unit owner of our MLS, I get all the statistics of all the usage of all the great tools our MLS has. Plus I get all the statistics of all the great tools our company has. And yes, the adoption of new technologies in 2020 and the early parts of 2021 were through the roof. Companies like Earnnest, dotloop, certainly, Zoom, number one on the list, of course. But looking at the other older technologies that are out there for agents to manage their businesses, the traditional CRM, which they're not even traditional CRMs. The CRMs nowadays are so good. They're so awesome and intuitive. But if you watch the adoption rates, they've hardly moved at all. Has been a slight increase, but not much. And in the MLS, some of the adoption of some powerful data tools that the agents have available to them, single digit. And we're a very large MLS. So it always surprises me. And when you hear that 90-10 rule in real estate, it makes you wonder when you're looking at adoption rates. But that's where I go back to what I said. Maybe it's because one size doesn't fit all, and you have to look at, and so many technology companies, because they're all scrambling against each other, say, well, if we're not getting enough adoption with this part of our product, so why don't we introduce a new product? Which it just doesn't work. Next thing you know, they haven't controlled this product yet, and they've got 4 new products, and it's diluted everything they've done. So as a company, we just take a look at what products can we make available to our agents that will be intuitive to the agent and with the support staff, because a lot of times the best adoption in any individual office, and Ashley could probably answer to this too, is the support they get right at the local level. And so that's how we look at it. And again, it goes back to making it easier, because if it's easy for the agent, they're going to make it easy for the consumer.
Yeah, I think as technology consumers, we all, doesn't matter whether we're 20 or 100, we want easier technology, and the best technology is the easiest technology. The most technical stuff does all the work for you, right? I mean, when I was an agent, I used to have to memorize commands. I'm really aging myself now, and today I can take my phone and draw on a map with my finger and tap a few buttons, right? So you had mentioned earlier, Ashley, you talk about simplicity a little bit. Is there anything generational in your environment or in your brokerage? And can you just talk about that a little bit? And does it matter really? Because I think what I'm hearing from the others is it doesn't matter, right?
Well, okay, you're going to have to forgive me a bit for this, because I am really a deep nerd on this, because to study technological adoption is crucial. Every single broker, every single one of our franchisees that comes to us, we need to be able to arm them with the information that they need to encourage and enable tech adoption. It's so important for an advanced agent. So I could write like a thesis on this at this point, but I break it down not necessarily by generations, but it's kind of categories. You have the new agents and what technology do they need to succeed. And then I break down my next tier is sort of the established agent and what technology do they need to succeed. And then you have your top tier agent, your successful agent. And when you're talking about helping these agents grow to enhance and move from one tier to the next tier, you cannot say, like John was saying, it's not one size fits all. If I focus on tech adoption for new client acquisition for a well-established agent who has an amazing sphere, that's not what they need. They need different technology. The new agent needs to focus on new agent acquisition. So you get agents of any different age in all of those categories. So for me, and in my experience with encouraging agent adoption and monitoring it and tracking it, it's not what I would consider a generational. It's not necessarily a millennial versus a Gen Xer versus a boomer. It's more where they're at in their business and the technologies that they need. Because when you look at the data, exactly what John was saying, what technologies saw a massive increase in adoption over the year, it is what the agents needed. If an agent needs something, they will cross heaven and earth to learn how to do it. If they don't physically need it right now, you can have the most amazing predictive analytics that absolutely can identify some very crucial points in the real estate transaction. If the agent doesn't need that today, there's nothing in the world that can make them take their time to sit and learn it and adopt it. So technological adoption in many cases is driven by need, and you have to be very thoughtful about matching the right person with the right category. Because if you can get the right technological adoption for an agent in the right category, they will see incredible amounts of success and gains in their business that they wouldn't have done otherwise. It is not one size fits all.
I couldn't agree with you more. If you're doing 4 transactions a year, your needs are very different than someone doing 50 a year, right?
Yes.
If you're an individual agent versus a team, if you're maybe dealing with entry-level buyers versus luxury properties, you have all sorts of different needs. Now, I want to go to but we've mentioned it a few times, but I'll get more specific on the question. Everybody's favorite topic, COVID. We love to continue to talk about it. What trends do you see persisting post-pandemic? Russell, why don't we go to you?
Sure.
We know you're going to say Earnnest, but include
no,
that.
hey, from March of 2019 to 2020, we saw about a 13x increase in our usage. But I think, the cat is out of the bag, right? This digital innovation in this moving more and frankly, moving to Ashley's point from earlier, trying to keep up with consumer expectations. It only moves in one direction. So some of these trends are likely to decelerate a little bit, but not go backwards. So I think we talked about it before, while real estate is still very in-person and relationship based, I think the importance just in general of in-person is up for debate like never before, right? Some people doing things they've never done in their spare bedrooms, like working a full-time job. So things like digital payments, e-signature, hopefully not just in our neck of the woods within real estate. I think it's going to be even more so. We're going to see those happen in a much bigger way in these others that have been more laggards to us. Like I said, your typical mortgage, title, insurance. I think that's places where there's still more to come. But frankly, again, I'd like to kind of shut up and share my time. I'd love to hear what John and Ashley think about that.
Yeah, John?
Well, when I was listening to Russell, I wrote down the word two words, digital security. That's been on our mind a lot. So we are looking at a lot of different avenues of how we can rein that in. We are concerned, again, we love our agents, but if they're not all on the same platform or working within our platform, that means there's information that's going out and we don't have control of it. So certainly I think there's going to be a big trend towards digital security in the next year, probably the next 12 months, if it hasn't already started. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Ashley.
I think the two trends that I can identify, at least two of my top priorities. The first one is finding efficiencies with automation. We can give our agents tools, but the more that they have to touch or interject themselves into those processes, the more drop off we have in getting to the next step. So I think it understanding, and part of it's the pandemic, but part of it's just the evolution of our industry, the strides forward we're making. We now have the technological capabilities to drop the walls between some of these platforms. So at every section, looking for automation, looking for efficiencies. And then the other subset for me is just, again, focusing on every area that a physical geographic boundary is holding back the consumer or the agent or the broker, and what can we be doing to analyze the different areas there to bring them back. Like I know I've mentioned it before, but I think the first thing the agents are willing to drop post-pandemic is the world of video conferences. So many of them are ready to be done with it, but honestly, this is going to be one of those that we talk again in 5 years. I will be meeting with all of our brokers and our agents again and say, would you ever go back to a world where you had to physically meet with your client every time you talk to them? And they'll laugh and say, absolutely not. So I think post-pandemic, many of these trends, they will stay. So for me, it's very much automations and efficiency and physical boundaries and limits.
Yeah, and I think we'll just take our time to find that mix, right? Well, everybody wants to get back to the office and see their colleagues, but once they are commuting for a few days, maybe they'll just do it a couple of days a week, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we moved up to Napa from San Francisco in December of 2019. Gosh, the last couple of years have just flown together. COVID hit a few months later, and we expected that kind of distance to be shortened over time. That sped up in a big way. But to your point, Joe, it's whatever this is some hybrid. It's a mix. It's people don't want to just like live in their spare bedrooms forever. They also don't want to spend 30% of their life commuting. So I definitely think there's a hybrid approach there, and that necessity of in-person is really fungible.
Yeah, we've already planned out most our meetings for next year, and it is a hybrid. And it's the travel time. It's because Chicago's a big landscape, and for some of our key people, it's a half a day just to travel. So let's do it 50-50. And because they still want the camaraderie. They beg for the camaraderie too.
An interesting evolution that I think that we saw during the pandemic, when one of the objections that you would get when you talked about technological adoption from an agent was that they might be willing to do the technology, but their consumers weren't ready for it. Their clients weren't comfortable with it. And in the pandemic, it's not just real estate agents that have been faced with trying to come up with virtual solutions. so many of their clients and consumers have, that they for their jobs are doing virtual deals, virtual business, virtual meetings. And so that objection has dropped. There is more of a comfort level on both sides of the table that we can evolve how we do this business and make it more virtual, more digital, much more convenient.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll end on that. We're out of time. You've been a great panel. I appreciate your time. We appreciate your time. Thanks, and look forward to connecting with each of you one-on-one in the future.
Thanks, Joe.
Have a
Thanks,
great
you.
day. Thanks.
Thanks all.
And we can end recording.
Scene.
What trends do you see persisting post-pandemic? Russell, why don't we go to you?
Sure.
We know you're going to say Earnnest, but include
no,
that.
hey, from March of 2019 to 2020, we saw about a 13x increase in our usage. But I think, the cat is out of the bag, right? This digital innovation in this moving more and frankly, moving to Ashley's point from earlier, trying to keep up with consumer expectations, it only moves in one direction. So some of these trends are likely to decelerate a little bit, but not go backwards. So I think we talked about it before, while real estate is still very in-person and relationship based, I think the importance just in general of in-person is up for debate like never before, right? Some people doing things they've never done in their spare bedrooms, like working a full-time job. So things like digital payments, e-signature, hopefully not just in our neck of the woods within real estate. I think it's going to be even more so. We're going to see those happen in a much bigger way in these others that have been more laggards to us. Like I said, your typical mortgage, title, insurance. I think that's places where there's still more to come. But frankly, again, I'd like to kind of shut up and share my time. I'd love to hear what John and Ashley think about that.
Yeah, John?
Well, when I was listening to Russell, I wrote down the word two words, digital security. That's been on our mind a lot. So we are looking at a lot of different avenues of how we can rein that in. We are concerned, again, we love our agents, but if they're not all on the same platform or working within our platform, that means there's information that's going out and we don't have control of it. So certainly I think there's going to be a big trend towards digital security in the next year, probably the next 12 months, if it hasn't already started. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Ashley.
I think the two trends that I can identify, at least two of my top priorities. The first one is finding efficiencies with automation. We can give our agents tools, but the more that they have to touch or interject themselves into those processes, the more drop off we have in getting to the next step. So I think it understanding, and part of it's the pandemic, but part of it's just the evolution of our industry, the strides forward we're making. We now have the technological capabilities to drop the walls between some of these platforms. So at every section, looking for automation, looking for efficiencies. And then the other subset for me is just, again, focusing on every area that a physical geographic boundary is holding back the consumer or the agent or the broker, and what can we be doing to analyze the different areas there to bring them back. Like I know I've mentioned it before, but I think the first thing the agents are willing to drop post-pandemic is the world of video conferences. So many of them are ready to be done with it, but honestly, this is going to be one of those that when we talk again in 5 years, I will be meeting with all of our brokers and our agents again and say, would you ever go back to a world where you had to physically meet with your client every time you talk to them? And they'll laugh and say, absolutely not. So I think post-pandemic, many of these trends, they will stay. So for me, it's very much automations and efficiency and physical boundaries and limits.
Yeah, and I think we'll just take our time to find that mix, right? Well, everybody wants to get back to the office and see their their colleagues, but once they are commuting for a few days, maybe they'll just do it a couple of days a week, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we moved up from to Napa from San Francisco in December of 2019. Gosh, the last couple of years have just flown together. COVID hit a few months later, and we expected that kind of distance to be shortened over time. That sped up in a big way. But to your point, Joe, it's whatever this is some hybrid. It's a mix. It's people don't want to just like live in their spare bedrooms forever. They also don't want to spend 30% of their life commuting. So I definitely think there's a hybrid approach there, and that necessity of in-person is really fungible.
Yeah, we've already planned out most our meetings for next year, and it is a hybrid. And it's the travel time. It's because Chicago's a big landscape, and for some of our key people, it's a half a day just to travel. So let's do it 50-50. And because they still want the camaraderie. They beg for the camaraderie too.
An interesting evolution that I think that we saw during the pandemic, when one of the objections that you would get when you talked about technological adoption from an agent was that they might be willing to do the technology, but their consumers weren't ready for it. Their clients weren't comfortable with it. And in the pandemic, it's not just real estate agents that have been faced with trying to come up with virtual solutions. So many of their clients and consumers have that they, for their jobs, are doing virtual deals, virtual business, virtual meetings. And so that objection has dropped. There is more of a comfort level on both sides of the table that we can evolve how we do this business and make it more virtual, more digital, much more convenient.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll end on that. We're out of time. You've been a great panel. I appreciate your time. We appreciate your time. Thanks, and look forward to connecting with each of you one-on-one in the future.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Joe.
Joe.
Have
Thank
a great
you.
day. Thanks.
Thanks all.